Dang, you're still listening to this hot mess? You deserve a medal. For real, thank you for listening to Heart of the Wolf, a paranormal romance novel by Mariposa, available in print and ebook on Amazon.com. Chapter 24. A little after 6 p.m. on Friday evening, Gareth sat in his Camaro in front of Vin's RV. Whimsical purple clouds filled the sky, outlined by the flaming orange sunset. For now, the sky was clear, but the autumn wind was cold, and he could feel moisture gathering in the air. He didn't need to check the weather report to know a storm was brewing. It would probably reach them tonight. Vin lived in a black and white camper parked on a wooded property on the outskirts of Black River. It looked like a three-season camper. It made Gareth wonder what his plans were for the winter. Maybe he'd offer up the shop to the kid if it snowed. The RV didn't look like a weatherproof kind of place. Vin's rental wasn't as far out as Maddy's mobile home, but still secluded, with a bit of acreage covered in fir trees, blackberry vines, and wild grass. A ditch ran down the side of the property that connected to a storm drain in the street. It was a typical Black River kind of place. He saw a few broken down, rusty cars buried in the bushes. An old house stood way back from the road. It didn't look hospitable or welcoming. The windows were covered in sheets. Behind the house, Gareth glimpsed the side of a rotted-out school bus. He would have thought the property was abandoned, except for a big blue-nosed pit bull chained up on the front porch. Gareth drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. He let out a long, slow breath. Then he read Maddy's text again. Fasting? The fuck? Why was she fasting? She needed protein. He checked out the playlist she sent him. He liked the vibe. Phanogram had a haunting electronica sound. It was a bit moody, a bit pop. He could see why Maddy liked it. He preferred Ghost or Outcast, but it was a good mix. After listening to a few tunes, he turned off his phone and slid it into his pocket. Jesus, Vin. Hurry the fuck up, he muttered. His mind wandered back to the day before. Thursday was a shit show at work. It was a busy morning at Jack's Auto Repair. Lots of customers picking up cars. They had several calls for a tow, which meant Vin was gone with the truck most of the day. Good for business, but that left Gareth alone at the garage to handle the customers. He finally locked the doors around 1 p.m. for lunch and sat down at his computer with a sigh. Fucking needy people. The hardest part of the job was dealing with customers. The worst were the guys who knew just enough about cars to argue with him over the work. Pushy and entitled as hell. Second worst were the suspicious ones who thought he was trying to rip them off for extra services. It didn't matter how many 5-star reviews he had on Yelp. There was always some detective trying to pull up dirt on his business or complain enough to get a discount. He supposed some people just operated that way, like Mrs. Makovich. Find the smallest thing to complain about, then don't let go until you get a coupon. That might work with big franchise places like McDonald's, but not a small business. They could fuck right off. He almost threw a guy out that morning who accused him of upcharging for a whole list of services. The fucking audacity. He got out the guy's service agreement and took him through the work order. He pointed out a list labeled suggestions with quotes good for 30 days, then a separate list of actual work performed. Some people just didn't read. Gareth sat back in his office chair with a deep groan and rubbed his temples. A burger and fries sat on his desk, untouched. He knew he should eat, but really he just wanted a nap. Fuck, what a day. Instead of eating lunch, he opened up the browser on his computer. He had a folder of bookmarks for the different werewolf Reddit boards online, the legit ones, not the goofy ones about Hollywood movies or Halloween. They were all closed communities. You had to show pack affiliation to get accepted. He'd been signed up for those boards a long time, since before Iraq. He had a lot else on his mind other than work, which was adding to his stress. Since yesterday's driving lesson up on the mountain, he couldn't stop thinking about the Grey Ridge Pack. While he enjoyed spending time with Maddy, he regretted taking her so far into the wilderness. When they ran across that old creepy birdwatcher, he realized the possible danger he had put her in. They were fortunate the guy was just camping off season, possibly homeless and just passing through. It could have been the Grey Ridge Pack waiting for them out there. Then Gareth would have had to fight them off without backup or an easy escape. He couldn't do that again. He needed to find out more about their pack, their numbers, and their territory. It was pretty clear that they intended to spread into Black River and he was in the way. The threat wasn't going to disappear. But how many was he up against? A dozen? 100? Wolf packs varied a lot in size. He opened up the werewolf Reddit boards and started searching different keywords. Upstate New York werewolves, Grey Ridge, New England wolf packs. He couldn't find anything recent. He had to go deeper. Gareth opened up an incognito tab and entered a web address from memory. The web page that loaded was black with a single login screen. It wasn't the kind of website that would show up on search engines like Google or Yahoo, but if you were a wolf, you knew about it. He typed in his username and password and hit enter. The web page loaded a black user panel with green text. On the home screen was a long list of countries and various states, regions, and major cities. Under each major city was a list of topics and discussions. This was the wolf web, basically Craigslist for werewolves. Under every major city was a subtopic called hunt and play. If you were a wolf, you knew what hunt and play meant. Basically, it was a list of invitations for meetups on the full moon, where wolves could run together, hunt, play, fuck shit up, kill large game, and other group activities not related to kickball or bar hopping. A lot of new packs formed that way. Not all wolf packs were full-on kingdoms like the Phoenix pack, which controlled the Sonoran Desert up through Vegas. Some packs were just 6 or 7 wolves who liked to hunt big game together on the full moon. It just depended on the size of the community in the area and if an alpha was in charge. For whatever reason, packs always sprung up around alphas. It tended to happen organically, and it was part of the mystery of being a wolf. Likewise, alphas seemed built for that business. They naturally took charge. It was in the blood. By all means, Gareth knew he should be starting a new pack of his own. He was almost 30, so it was about that time. He was entering his prime as far as alpha strength and vitality was concerned. It made him that much more of a threat to the Grey Ridge pack. His lone presence out in Black River was an anomaly for their kind, just like his little wolf girl. Gareth liked the way his younger brother Anthony described the alpha wolf using a video game analogy. Anthony was always into computer stuff. Even as a kid, he was already a brilliant programmer. He remembered his brother's words from when they were in high school together, before Gareth went into the army.
Let's say you're playing an open-world RPG. There's always a bunch of monsters roaming the map. You got your regular fiends and maybe a few high-ranking beasts wandering around for extra XP. But every now and then, a superboss monster spawns that's 20 levels too strong and impossible to kill. And if you defeat it, you get a lot of extra loot. And that's an alpha wolf.
Gareth grinned. Yeah, he was a boss monster. Some witchy human folk swore that alpha parts, bones, teeth, pelt, blood, semen, had magic powers, good for spells or potions or whatever. He didn't know much about that, but he knew some eccentric people went after that loot. Just like there were werewolf forums, there were also hunters, but that was another world, nothing he ever dealt with before. Wolves wanted to be safe, just like anyone else, so part of having a big pack was that added layer of security. Last he remembered, his brother Anthony lived in Vegas and used his computer whiz powers to protect the Phoenix pack against local hunters. A lot of it was keeping their presence hidden and anonymous. It was a whole thing. Shit, he hadn't talked to Anthony in a long time. Gareth scrolled down the website to the section labeled United States, then clicked on the New England postings, then the upstate New York postings in his local area. He finally clicked on Hunt and Play. First result was for an auction. He scrolled past it. Of course, it wasn't labeled female breeder auction, but the context was obvious. The subject header read,
"Meet lusty females, eager to mate. High stamina will keep you up all night."
Technically, auctions were illegal, but that didn't stop them from happening. A lot of postings on the wolf web were for sex. Wolf libido was a thing. Most of the ads were phishing schemes or dead links, but a few led to the real thing, secret auctions where female breeders could be purchased. Every wolf knew about it. It was almost assumed whenever a pair of bonded mates were encountered that the female was purchased, unless it was a human female. Of course, that wasn't very fair to female wolves. If they were lucky, they had a strong pack to protect them. Unlike Maddy. He opened the search bar and typed in the keyword, Grey Ridge. Finally, some results. He found a handful of postings that went back about 2 years, when he found the earliest hunt and play meetup. Most of them were out of Niagara Falls, a little out of his way on the other side of Lake Ontario, but a few were closer to home. He saw a meetup posted 2 months ago in Davenport. When he clicked on it, he saw an address for the River King Casino on the outskirts of Davenport. That was probably where Dean first encountered them. It wasn't hard to imagine Maddy's dad rubbing shoulders with the Grey Ridge Wolfpack, especially considering their vibe. They were basically a bunch of petty thieves and glorified bar rats like Dean, from what Gareth could tell. Maybe their alpha Marquise was more sophisticated, but he doubted it. Every Wolfpack had a vibe, and that vibe usually followed its alpha. So Marquise was just a drug lord operating out of Canada who had gathered enough followers to expand his territory. Great. He sounded like a pain in the ass. Gareth clicked through a few more postings, trying to find any information on the size of the Grey Ridge pack, but mentions were sparse. Finally, he signed out and closed his browser. Well, at least he knew a bit more about their territory and history. They were fairly new, so they weren't very established yet. If he really wanted to confront them, he could always drive down to the River King Casino and bust some heads. But that seemed like a lot of gas to waste just to break a few jaws, and he had a business to run. His eyes flickered down to his desk. He saw his phone light up with the name, Brad. What did his little wolf girl want now? Gareth growled low in his throat, unaware of the sound. He woke up with the taste of her still on his mouth. He'd been thinking about that tight little candy snatch all day. He wanted to taste her again. Lick out that sugary filling. Fuck, she was sweet. Those pretty pink lips were gonna get a lot of attention, soon as they got past this awkward friends thing. He was a patient man when he needed to be. Last night had been, well, fuck. He didn't expect her to send a topless pic. That surprised him. He remembered gazing at his phone for a long minute, his eyes dilated, and his jaw clenched. Damn, his innocent young mate was getting bold. Good. He wanted to see her get wild. He saved her pic to a folder on his phone, which he used that morning with enthusiasm. A strange clunking sound from the driveway interrupted his thoughts, and Gareth put his phone down before checking it. At first he thought Vin was back with the tow truck, but then he heard a few voices talking. Another loud clang, this time against the garage door. He stood up from his desk. What the hell? He muttered. Then he called, The fuck are you doing, Vin? No answer. A beat of silence. Then a loud boom rattled through the garage. It sounded like someone had dropped a drain pan or a wrench or something heavy on the ground. What the hell? Was there a customer somewhere in the shop? With a growl of irritation, Gareth strode through the break room into the garage where two cars were up on lifts. He looked around, expecting to see Vin making a mess, but the garage was empty. That seemed extra suspicious. He paused for a moment, listening. Then he heard voices outside. Moving at a fast pace, Gareth walked from the garage into the lobby, around the front desk, and out through the customer entrance. The cold mountain air struck his face. It was a chill, cloudy day. The door to the lobby shut behind him with the little ding of a bell. He exited the building just as a loud gunshot rang out. He started and ducked. What the fuck? He demanded. Johnny stood at the border of his property to his left. He had a shotgun in hand and a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. His face was stone cold.
Looks like you got a pest problem, G.
Gareth's head swung to his right where two goons dressed in hoodies and N95 masks looked equally startled. Cans of spray paint fell onto the slick asphalt in front of his garage doors. By the look of it, they were defacing the front of his property. The big garage doors were marked up with ugly red and black spray paint. Gareth felt a surge of rage. It looked like the little punks had been going at it for a while.
You want me to bury a bullet in their ass?
Not on my property. But thanks for the offer, Gareth said. The two men looked between Johnny and Gareth. Then, in a mad scramble, they took off running across the parking lot. Gareth charged after them, his boots slamming against the ground, kicking up gravel in his wake. Fuck this nonsense, he thought. If he caught the little bastards, he was going to drag them personally to the police station. The two punks jumped the ditch at the side of his property and ran into the woods. Gareth flew over the ditch after them. He sprinted through the forest, relying on his wolf senses to follow after his prey. His pulse quickened, his eyes dilated. Now he was on the hunt. That's when he caught a whiff of their scent, and it all made a certain kind of sense. These weren't just regular delinquents vandalizing his property. These were wolves. Gareth felt his hackles go up. He would recognize that stench anywhere. It was the Grey Ridge pack again. The hell? Were they taunting him? Trying to rile him up? Well, it was working. But why would they send two kids to vandalize his property in broad daylight? Gareth sprinted through the woods, following the trail of the two wolves. He was gaining ground fast. He knew this wilderness like the back of his hand. It was familiar territory. His territory. He often wandered this section of the mountain at night. It was a good place to hunt white-tailed deer. He knew the location of all the streams, the deer trails and rabbit holes, the alder groves and the juniper bushes. The Grey Ridge pack had a disadvantage. They just didn't know it yet. Then Gareth's eyes discerned a strange dip in the ground before him. He leapt over it automatically. Light glinted. There. Steel jaws snapped shut. The shower of dirt from Gareth's passing set off the bear trap buried under a layer of yellow leaves. Luckily, his foot barely brushed it. He cleared it before the trap was sprung. Gareth landed on the other side of the giant steel jaws. He stumbled forward a few feet. He came to a halt amidst a copse of dogwood trees and juniper bushes. He looked back at the trap. A flurry of red maple leaves fell down from above, shaken loose by the wind. Gareth listened to the whispers of the woodland. He didn't think anyone was nearby, but that didn't mean the two wolves wouldn't circle back to check on him, to see if he'd fallen for their trap. Gareth walked over to the clamped metal jaws. A thick chain was buried under the layer of autumn foliage on the ground. The fucking thing would have snapped his leg in half. These fuckers were relentless. The Grey Ridge pack was really starting to piss him off. Was this another assassination attempt? Maybe he should be flattered. Gareth glanced around the woods again, considering his options, but he really wasn't in the mood to play cat and mouse with these fools. He decided to head back to the shop. He didn't see the point in chasing the two wolves deeper into the woods. Either they would try to lead him into another trap, or he would run into more wolves, and he had shit to do. The shop wouldn't run itself. Gareth was a bit more cautious on his walk back to the shop. The woods stank of the Grey Ridge pack. It looked like they'd been circling around his property for a few days. If he wasn't so distracted by Maddy, he probably would have noticed them sooner, so they were keeping tabs on Jack's auto repair. Enjoy, motherfuckers. Nothing much to see except used tires and cranky customers. As he leapt over the ditch that separated his property from the woods, he saw Vin climbing out of the tow truck, a bag of fast food in hand. He didn't see Johnny anywhere. The old Japanese man must have returned to the gas station. He would have to duck in later and apologize. He knew Johnny had his back, but he didn't like causing trouble for his neighbors.
The hell happened? I saw Johnny walking around with a shotgun. And what's with the tagging on the garage doors?
Vandals. I chased them into the woods.
Did you catch up with them?
No luck. They got away. Gareth paused next to Vin. The two men stared at the ruined garage doors. Gareth wanted to groan. Painting a building the size of his auto shop cost an arm and a leg. And he just got it done in a nice industrial gray color with red trim. The spray paint across the doors was gruesome. The threats didn't leave much to the imagination. Death 2 Alpha was sprayed across one door with a shitty caricature of a wolf skull. The second door read, "We will mount your head." They spelled mount like munt. Vin took out his vape pen and puffed on it, considering the rude letters across the front of the building.
It's not even good. Like, there's graffiti art, and then there's just pissing on someone's turf. This ain't no art, boss. Yeah, I know. Like, I think someone's trying to threaten you.
Probably, Gareth agreed. You into street art, Vin?
Hell yes. I'm no Banksy, but yeah, I paint. Mostly freestyle. I've got a few places I go to practice. Like out in the woods, there's a quarry down near the old Jefferson Bridge. Some train tracks run along it. Lots of kids tag out there.
Right. You ever paint murals? Vin looked over at him.
I've done a few. Why?
Would you do one across the doors?
You serious?
Yeah. Gareth pointed at the crooked writing. Just cover up this shit. I hate seeing this. Why don't you turn it into good art? I'll buy the paint, and I'll drop a bonus on your paycheck when it's done. Vin stared at him with a spark in his dark eyes.
Okay, cool. What do you want?
Something with a mountain. Maybe some trees. I'm not picky. Just make it good for the customers. Gareth started pulling off his bloody shirt. Anyway, I'm gonna take a quick shower. Watch the front desk for me, will you? I still need to find an invoice for the green Honda. Vin followed Gareth inside through the customer entrance.
Oh, I got it up front. It's in the folder with the service agreements.
We have a folder for that.
Yeah, I made one.
Gareth sighed. Well, now I feel dumb. Then he released a wry laugh. Shit, he should have asked sooner. That was yesterday afternoon. Then last night, he had gone after work to check on Maddy's trailer. He had changed into a wolf to scope out the property in the woods. His worst fears were confirmed when he found tracks from the Grey Ridge pack at the border of her backyard. They were only a day old. It looked like several wolves had prowled unnervingly close to her house, which meant they were still coming after Dean. It pissed him off. First, this was his backyard, as in, his territory. For 5 years now, he had come to this yard to keep an eye on her, to check on her, or just to be close to her. And now these fuckers were hovering around like solicitors leaving flyers on his doorstep. They even had the balls to threaten him at his own place of business. Attempted assassination, no less. It was fucking rude. Sure, he was a lone wolf living far away from his family and the Sonoran pack. But he was still an alpha, and he didn't like these new wolves invading his turf. Especially coming this close to Maddy. She could easily get caught in the fray if the situation escalated. Fucking Dean, he thought. What did you do? He didn't think the pack was after Maddy, per se. But whatever Dean had gotten mixed up in wasn't going away. It must involve a lot of money, he thought. Now here he was, Friday night, getting ready to go to a Halloween carnival, not exactly lying low. Gareth drummed his fingers on the steering wheel of the Camaro as he waited outside Vin's RV. He pondered the situation, his mind churning voraciously, looking at every possible course of action. He had to do something to keep the Grey Ridge pack off his territory, but what? He didn't want to resort to calling his brothers, but did he have any other options? Contacting his brothers was a big risk. They were alphas too, and they might take a liking to his territory. He would be forfeiting his hard-won privacy. Once his brothers came to Black River, he wouldn't be able to escape his family any longer. Gareth groaned. There really wasn't a good solution. He couldn't wage war on the Grey Ridge pack by himself. Could he? Maybe they were already at war. He wouldn't be surprised if Marquis himself showed up on his doorstep next week, ready to blow his brains out personally. Vin opened the car door and slid into the passenger seat of the Camaro.
Are you ready to get going to this haunted house, boss?
Yup. You don't gotta call me boss, Vin. We're off work.
Well, don't ask me to call you by your first name, 'cause that's just weird.
Mr. Delarosa it is, then. Look, Vin, about yesterday.
Hey, it's cool, but is there something you want to tell me? Are you dealing drugs out of the shop? Is this a gang thing? Is Johnny in on it?
No drugs, Gareth reassured him. And no, Johnny, our Yakuza friend, has nothing to do with it. A situation happened maybe a week ago. I think these guys want to sort it out.
Sort it out? By murdering you?
Sure. Vin was quiet for a moment as he considered it.
So, what is the situation? Did you get in a bar fight with the wrong crowd?
Something like that.
That's shady as hell.
Vin puffed on his vape, then continued.
Alright, so I was thinking about it. Why do these jerks keep coming by the garage? I think because it's secluded. There'd be witnesses at your house, right? You have neighbors in town, but the garage is on the edge of the woods.
There's still the gas station, Gareth pointed out.
Old Johnny won't call the cops. That gas station would burn to the ground before he dialed 911.
True, Gareth agreed, surprised that Vin had put so much thought into it. You're right. Not gonna lie, Vin. They'll probably be back. You don't have to keep working at the shop if you don't feel safe.
Fuck that. I like my job and you're my boss, so I got your back.
Gareth grinned. All right, then we're cool?
Yeah. You just tell me if you need backup.
That's good to know. But I don't want you doing anything stupid. These guys show up with more guns. I want you out of the way. Don't risk your life. I'm serious.
All right. Sure.
Gareth put on his sunglasses. Sun was setting on the highway. He slammed the Camaro into gear and took off, burning rubber down Highway 20. He couldn't drive like this with Maddy in the car. It would spook her. But Vin appreciated it. The kid let out a whoop and rolled down the window as the Camaro's motor roared and raged. Gareth found himself baring his teeth in a grim smile. He still didn't have a plan, but next time these wolves came at him, he would be prepared. No mercy. He might need to issue an alpha challenge. Defeating Marquis might be the only way to put an end to their shenanigans. He would have to wait and see what they tried next.
Hi, it's B. Thanks for listening to Heart of the Wolf. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast and share with your friends. You can read ahead in the print book or ebook available on Amazon.com. Here's the next chapter for your listening pleasure.
Chapter 25. Fright Farm Haunted Manor was an old Victorian-era farmhouse built on Beaumont Farms, where Fruitdale Road met Old Route 99. The house was no longer used by the Beaumont family and preserved as a historical landmark. At different times of the year, it was rented out for weddings and special events. During Halloween, the old Victorian farmhouse and the 20 acres surrounding it were converted into a fairground. The old manor drew crowds from all over Jefferson County, from Davenport to Whitehaven.
It's packed,
B said as they trudged across the parking lot.
It's opening weekend. I told you it was going to be crazy.
A long line of cars spilled into overflow parking. The front gates to the old plantation were built of brick and mortar, with big decadent archways from the Greek Revival period. The gates were 60 feet wide and about 15 feet deep. There, a long line of people waited for bag checks and ticketing before entering the fair. "How old is this thing?" Maddy asked, gazing up at the brick front gates. Surprisingly, it was Levi who answered. He was holding a flyer for the fair in one hand. He read from it.
Fright Farm Haunted Manor began as the Beaumont Harvest Festival when the farm saw its first profitable year in 1866. Dang, so that's like more than 100 years ago.
Yep. And before that, this land belonged to the natives.
Becca sounded proud. Maddy glanced over at Becca and B. Their native heritage wasn't immediately obvious, as they were a few generations removed, but she could see it in their beautiful, thick hair. She thought of B's grandmother and her connection to the mountain. There was something sacred about this land, she had no doubt. Maddy's group walked almost half a mile through gravel and mud to get to the front entrance of the fairground. Rochelle and Andy were waiting for them in front of the big gates. Andy saw them and started waving. B waved back animatedly. Maddy shoved her hands in the pockets of her heavy flannel jacket. The sky was a vibrant blood orange color, and the weak autumn sun was quickly disappearing behind the mountains. Laughter, carnival music, and spooky sound effects drifted on the chill autumn air. She had already seen dozens of teens who she recognized from Black River High. B noticed the anxious look on Maddy's face as she scanned the parking lot.
Has he texted you?
B asked in a whisper. Maddy glanced at her phone for the 10th time since they got out of the car. No. Not yet.
It took forever to find a spot. They're probably parking.
Yeah, maybe. Maddy tried to hide her nervousness, but since leaving the car, a pit had been forming in her stomach. What if Gareth ditched her? He wouldn't, she told herself, of course not. But then, where was he? Calm down, it's just a hangout. He texted you earlier, right? He doesn't need to check in with you, you're not his girlfriend. They reached Rochelle and Andy. Then Becca pointed to the front gates.
Why are we waiting around? Let's go inside.
No, let's wait a few more minutes.
Why? Who else is coming?
Maddy didn't answer right away. She shared a look with B.
Maddy invited someone.
Becca folded her arms and gave Maddy a searching glance, and Maddy felt a spike of anxiety. She hadn't mentioned Gareth to her before, and she didn't know what to say now. Yeah, I'm waiting for, my neighbor.
Okay, but I don't want to wait out here. Let's go inside and they can meet us up later.
Yeah, I gotta find a restroom. Empty the tank, you know? We were stuck in traffic for a long time.
Gross.
B groaned. Maddy didn't know what to say. She glanced back at the parking lot. Becca studied her for a moment longer with a searching expression. Maddy felt like B's older sister could read her mind.
Hey, we got phones. We'll go in first. Hit us up when your neighbor gets here.
Then Becca and Levi strode through the front gates of the fairground with Rochelle and Andy in tow. B and Maddy remained outside the entrance.
So, your neighbor?
B asked with a raised eyebrow. I know it's totally lame. I panicked, all right?
Yeah, well, I think you're adorable. Becca is a bit of a watchdog, so just be careful, all right? She's not going to be happy if she finds out you lied to her. She takes that stuff seriously.
Yeah, okay. Sorry. B lit up a cigarette and jumped on her phone, scrolling through Pick Place. Maddy turned to stare at the parking lot. The sky was darkening from vibrant orange to purple dusk. Groups of people walked between the cars, shadowy and indistinct. That evil little voice in the back of her mind taunted her. He's going to ghost you. He bailed. He's not coming. 15 minutes passed. As the sky darkened, the air cooled, and Maddy's bare midriff was covered in goosebumps. She folded her arms, a little cold.
Maddy, I hate to say it, but I'm tired of waiting. I'm getting cold. Let's go inside and get some hot chocolate.
B's suggestion made sense, and Maddy felt herself deflate. Honestly, she was tired of waiting too. She checked her phone one more time. Gareth still hadn't responded to her text from half an hour ago. Maybe he was driving, or maybe he wasn't coming. Yeah, okay. Let's go inside. Maddy avoided B's sympathetic look. She kept glancing over her shoulder as they passed through the front gates of the fairground. But no use. She didn't see him anywhere. Once inside the Halloween festival, Maddy was dazzled by all the bright lights and noises. Rows of carved pumpkins and hay bales lined the entryway. Orange and black streamers crisscrossed the main corridor through the fairground, with a big banner that read, "This way to the haunted manor." The sheer volume of people was overwhelming at first. Maddy's eyes dilated as she looked around, her heart quickening in her chest. Her hearing and sense of smell seemed excruciatingly keen. Bells rang, horns blared, and people shrieked with laughter. Actors in costume, dressed up like vampires, zombies, and spooky clowns, strode around the fairground, teasing and taunting different guests. A fellow dressed up like a scarecrow wandered around on stilts. Just inside the entrance to the fairground, a greenhouse had been decorated to look like the candy-themed cottage from the German fairy tale, Hansel and Gretel. A trio of ladies in extravagant witch costumes, complete with brooms, wigs, capes, and big warty noses, stood in front of the candy house. A line of kids with their parents waited their turn to take pictures. A vendor sold bags of homemade fudge out of the witch's house. It looked pretty cool. Giant gumdrops framed the door, man-sized lollipops decorated the garden, and the chimney was a strawberry cupcake. Maddy was tempted to get in line, but the wait was a half hour long. Then the wind shifted, and the magical scent of popcorn, churros, and fryer grease made Maddy's mouth water. B checked her phone and said,
Becca is at the food trucks. Let's go meet up with her. I want a bag of kettle corn.
B caught her hand and surged ahead, dragging Maddy through the fairground. It was Fright Farm's opening weekend, and the lines were long for all the food vendors. They got in line at a truck called Witch's Brew Coffees and Teas. Maddy only had a few dollars in her pocket, and at B's urging, she scrounged together enough for a cup of cider. Then Maddy and B went looking for Becca. BA's older sister and Levi had already gotten food and were sitting at the picnic tables. Rochelle and Andy were standing nearby taking pics with their phones. An outdoor stage was set up at the far end of the eating area. Under bright stage lights, Maddy saw a group of people standing about. An old lady wearing a yellow dress and a white bonnet was speaking into a microphone. She was dressed up like a historical pioneer woman. Maddy tried to hear what she was saying, but even with the help of the mic, her voice was too soft and wavering to reach the back tables. "What's all that about?" Maddy asked, pointing to the distant stage and the table full of judges. Andy answered her with some enthusiasm.
"Oh, there was a livestock competition. They hold one every year. They're handing out all the awards and medals now. The cash prizes are pretty sweet."
"You raise livestock?"
"Yeah. You know White Meadows Blueberry Farm?"
Maddy couldn't place it in her head. She didn't have a car, so she didn't leave town very often, but there were a lot of little farms in the area. A little ways downriver, heading away from the mountain, was a wide valley with lots of ranches and horse properties. The hardware store where Maddy worked catered to the downriver farming community, though originally Black River was a mining and forestry town. All the mines were closed on the mountain long ago and boarded off, but the old forestry roads still existed. A labyrinth of trails and switchbacks sprawled across the mountainside. The number of lost roads, hunting shacks, abandoned firewatch towers, mysterious alcoves, and strange burrows on the mountainside were innumerable. As for the downriver farming community, Maddy rarely traveled in that direction unless she was heading into Davenport. White Meadows Blueberry Farm? I might have heard of it, sorry. I don't know.
It's okay. Well, our farm is 20 minutes outside the town limits. We have cows, chickens, sheep, and some ponies. I used to compete in junior livestock competitions when I was younger. Anyway, it looks like the Higgins family won this year. They got the blue ribbon.
Who's that old-fashioned lady handing out the prizes?
Bea asked, pointing at the stage with a long black nail. Rochelle answered her.
That's Granny Beaumont. I'm surprised she's doing the awards this year. She had a stroke over the summer. We were all worried about her.
Becca chimed in from her seat at the picnic table.
Is that your grandma, Rochelle? I thought you looked familiar. I didn't recognize you with the pink hair.
Ha. Yeah, that's my grandma. She's been handing out the livestock awards for 40 years.
Rochelle blushed a little, and Maddy felt a bit of shock. Wait. You're Rochelle Beaumont? She blurted out. So then, is this like your Halloween festival?
That's funny. Not really. My cousins own the land and the town runs the festival. Like, I got a free ticket, but that's about it.
So you live in Elk Haven?
Yeah. It's no big deal.
Rochelle shrugged, looking even more bashful than before. Maddy didn't respond, but it was kind of a big deal. The Beaumont family was one of the founding families of Black River. They lived in Black River back when it was a post office and a general store. They owned most of the land the town was built on. Elk Haven used to be their private campground before they converted it into vacation homes. So Rochelle was something like Black River royalty, and her excessive show of humility only made it more real. Bea spoke up.
That's wild. We've been hanging out all summer, and I had no clue you were a Beaumont. Well, I feel dumb.
It's really no big deal. I didn't want to bring it up. People get weird when they find out.
Maddy could understand why. She was starting to feel uncomfortable, herself. She thought of her second-hand clothes and all the hours she put in at the hardware store just to keep the electricity on. Rochelle lived in a different world. A brief silence fell over the group as Maddy searched for something to say to Rochelle. Shit, this was awkward. So, what's it like owning half the town? Do you get discounts? Nope, she should bite her tongue. Rochelle seemed like a good person. No need to be snarky. Then a haughty, high-strung voice came from behind her. The familiarity of it made her cringe.
Oh, Rochelle. Hello, my dear. It's good to see you here.
Oh. Hello, Mrs. Makovich.
Rochelle sounded extra polite, almost plastic polite. Maddy half turned and caught sight of Mrs. Makovich standing behind them. Her stomach sank. Oh God. Where did she come from? She looked Mrs. Makovich up and down. The woman's hair fell past her shoulders in a sleek wave, a glossy, expensive-looking lemon blonde. She wore a red and white checkered dress with a very low V-cut neckline. The look seemed a bit too young and flirty for a woman her age, like she was trying a bit too hard. An impressive push-up bra supported her breasts, and a big gold cross dangled between her tits. Maddy thought of Mrs. Makovich hitting on Gareth at the car garage. She felt a little grossed out. Maybe the divorce wasn't just a rumor, and Mrs. Makovich really would be Ms. Banner soon.
Mom, can I have money for the carnival games?
Another cringeworthy voice reached Maddy's ears, and if possible, her stomach sank a little lower. There, prancing through the crowd, came Kaylee. She looked beautiful, of course. She was wearing a blue denim romper with spaghetti straps. Her blonde curls were tied back in a perky ponytail with cute little tendrils falling around her face. Kaylee glanced at Maddy. Her eyebrows arched up like she smelled something unpleasant. Then she turned back to her mom, who was pulling a $100 bill out of her wallet.
Here you go, honey. Remember, we have dinner reservations at the cider house in an hour. The mayor will be there. We don't want to be late.
I know, Mom.
Mrs. Makovich turned back to Rochelle.
Will you be attending the banquet dinner as well? Your grandma is giving a little speech on the history of the town, like she does every year. I'm glad to see she's recovered from her stroke.
She's doing a lot better. I'll probably be there, yeah.
Rochelle said in her fake nice voice. Then a beat of silence passed. Maddy glanced back and forth between their two groups, wondering at the tension. Mrs. Makovich was obviously brown-nosing. Rochelle seemed uncomfortable with all the attention. She and Kaylee were not acting friendly towards each other. Were they still friends? Maybe Rochelle had a falling out with Kaylee's group? Mrs. Makovich briefly met Maddy's gaze. Recognition flickered in her eyes, and her lips turned down in displeasure. She glanced over Maddy's crop top, flannel jacket, and ripped jeans. Was it just her imagination, or did the woman stare at her tits for a second too long? Makovich pursed her lips again. Then she looked away as though Maddy didn't even exist. She addressed Rochelle again.
It's been a while since you came over to our house, Rochelle. You should come by sometime. We're just up the street, you know? I'm sure Kaylee would love it.
Mom, stop. Rochelle's got other things to do.
Kaylee whined, scowling behind her mother.
Nonsense, Kaylee. You and Rochelle go way back. We just love the Beaumont family. You're all such fine people. Birds of a feather should flock together, I always say. You know, not everyone in this little town has a bright future ahead of them. Careful, you don't fall in with a bad crowd.
Mrs. Makovich gave Rochelle a winning pageant smile. Maddy only heard half of her words. Her anxiety was making it hard to focus, and she dropped her eyes to the ground. When Mrs. Makovich said not everyone has a bright future ahead of them, she was pretty sure the slight was aimed at her. B, who was also listening, looked furious. The little goth girl flicked her cigarette at Mrs. Makovich's shoes. Then she demanded,
"What is that supposed to mean?"
Mrs. Makovich stepped slightly to one side, avoiding the ash on the ground, then continued talking like no one else but Rochelle Beaumont existed.
This has been a pleasant little catch-up, but we're late to the awards ceremony. I hope to see you at the cider house later, Rochelle. We'll save you a seat. Come along, Kaylee.
Then Mrs. Makovich turned toward the stage and the judges' table. Without another word, she flounced off through the picnic tables with Kaylee in tow. Kaylee stuck her nose in the air as she walked past, mimicking her mom. She looked like a pedigree show dog prancing along after her master. Once they were out of earshot, Maddy said to B, "Thanks for standing up for me, or trying to, anyway."
No problem. I hate Mrs. Makovich. She's such an almond mom.
A what? Maddy asked.
You know, an almond mom, like the kind that give you an eating disorder? One of those typical skinny bitch moms.
Rochelle was listening, but now she chimed in.
Yeah, she's awful. I used to feel sorry for Kaylee, but now I think she's just like her mom. You know what I think? I think Mrs. Makovich knows what Kaylee gets up to, and she uses her influence on the school board to protect her. I think that's why Kaylee gets away with all the shit she pulls.
The group was quiet for a moment, considering that. Then Maddy asked the question that was obviously on everyone's mind. Hey, so, weren't you part of Kaylee's group last year?
I was, until I realized she's a stuck-up bitch. My grandma hates their family. She thinks they're all con artists who moved up here from New York City. Kaylee really hates you, by the way.
Andy put a hand to her mouth.
Rochelle, that's too blunt.
B was also listening with a pissed-off look on her face.
I think the whole school knows that by now.
Yeah, she tortures me. Maddy shrugged, trying to be nonchalant. Rochelle agreed and said,
She used to talk shit about you all the time when we hung out.
That's kinda psycho. She sounds obsessed. I don't get it. Why all this focus on Maddy?
Her mom started it, like back in middle school. I think her mom thought Maddy's family was, like,
trash? Maddy suggested. Rochelle winced, but she didn't deny it. She continued her story.
Mrs. Makabich told Kaylee to stay away from you because of your mom and the drugs. She said it was bad news when your mom overdosed and you got held back for a year. Fuck, I'm sorry, Maddy. I didn't mean to say it like that.
It's fine. Maddy shoved her hands in her pockets. At least Rochelle was honest, even if she didn't sugarcoat things. Her pulse quickened as her anxiety spiked. Those were painful memories. Look, it wasn't drugs. It was sleeping pills. My mom took too many, or mixed them with wine, or something like that. It was an accident.
A tragedy.
B added.
I had no idea, Maddy. I'm so sorry. That must have been terrible for you.
Andy rushed to say, yeah, well, shit happens. Maddy grumbled, uncomfortable. She sounded like Gareth just then. Shit happens. That's just life. She didn't like talking about her mom. It always left her with a confusing mix of shame and grief. Rochelle continued.
So that's how it all started. And I think the bullying has gone on this long because Kaylee's jealous of you.
Maddy scoffed. What? That's ridiculous. Why would anyone be jealous of me? Rochelle raised an eyebrow.
You really don't know?
No, I have no idea.
Trace Reynolds.
What are you talking about? I thought they broke up in 9th grade.
They did. It was epic. I'm pretty sure Trace was her first. Like, she told me they did it the first time in the treehouse in her backyard. They broke up like 3 times before she found out he was talking to other girls on Pick Place.
B snorted with laughter, breaking some of the tension.
I can't imagine losing my virginity in a tree house.
They all chuckled for a moment before Rochelle continued.
Trace was so popular, I think he was cheating on her the whole time. He was always talking to other girls, but Kaylee denies it. God, she still talks about him. Anyway, she tried to get him back after they broke up the 3rd time, then she found pics of you on his phone.
Maddy almost choked on her own saliva. Wait, huh? Pics of me?
Yeah, I was there for it. It was a shit show. I guess he took a bunch of pics of you at some football game. Kaylee stole his phone and we went through it at her house.
Maddy suddenly remembered the event. It was early sophomore year. She was on the color guard for a hot second before she had to quit extracurriculars and focus on work. She was a year older than everyone else on the team, and her tits had just made their big debut. The color guard uniforms were snug and form-fitting. After the game, she remembered Trace Reynolds coming down from the bleachers to hang out. She remembered him standing very close to her. But they didn't talk. It made her feel strangely violated that he had taken pictures of her on his phone without her consent. Rochelle continued.
He admitted to all of it when Kaylee confronted him. I guess he wanted to ask you out, but he didn't, because...
Because I'm trash? Maddy asked sarcastically. Rochelle looked uncomfortable.
Look, Maddy, I don't think of you like that. Just, people are awful.
Yeah, people suck. Don't feel bad, Maddy. I didn't know half of this stuff either. Not everyone thinks badly about you. Like I just thought you were B's new friend, and Trace Reynolds is a total creep. I don't care that he's hot. He always makes me feel uncomfortable.
Maddy didn't know what to say. Andy had been quietly listening for most of the conversation, and now she appreciated the shy girl's reassurance. But she still felt bad. Not even a playboy creeper like Trace Reynolds wanted to date crazy porno titties. She had a reputation, and now half the school thought she was a prostitute, all thanks to Kaylee Makabich. For real? Kaylee's held a grudge all this time over that?
I mean, yeah, Trace said some really shitty things to Kaylee when she confronted him about it. He said you were way hotter than her, and nicer, and that Kaylee was a slut. He said she had B.O.
Oh, that's hilarious.
B exclaimed sarcastically, and Rochelle cracked a smile, too. Rochelle hooked a strand of bubblegum pink hair behind a pierced ear, then she continued her story with a smirk on her lips.
So of course Kaylee couldn't let that slide. That's why she's always targeting you, Maddy. Anyway, I'm sorry, for what it's worth. I never wanted to bully you. It took a while to figure out what she was doing. We were all pretty dumb, and just a heads up, that group is still under her spell.
That sounds like an epic saga. So what made you leave?
B asked curiously. Rochelle looked up at the stage where they were handing out second-place ribbons to the contestants.
My grandma had a stroke last summer. It was a pretty big deal. The whole family rallied around her. I couldn't go camping with Kaylee and the rest of the group for her birthday weekend, and she threw a fit. She would not let it go. She's just a spoiled brat.
Rochelle was quiet, and then she added,
I wish I'd left the group earlier. I feel bad for the way we treated people. Kaylee really acts like she owns the school.
Well, I'm glad you figured that out, Maddy said, shoving her hands in her pockets and glancing at the ground. She felt a little awkward. It wasn't exactly pleasant to be reminded of her reputation as a black sheep. Maybe Rochelle was right. Kaylee would never be held accountable for her bullying as long as her mom was around to protect her. The awkward silence stretched between the four girls. It seemed like after the storm of gossip, no one really knew what to say, and Maddy was tired of feeling like all her dirty laundry was on display. Finally, Andy yawned and stretched.
I want to check out the livestock that won the competition. Rochelle, do you want to go with me? We can say hi to your grandma.
Yeah, good idea.
Rochelle and Andy linked arms and started through the crowd. Maddy watched them walk away. She messed with the buttons on her flannel jacket as she digested the past 20 minutes of conversation. That hard knot of anxiety in her stomach had returned. She had learned a lot, but it didn't really change anything. At least she knew now why Kaylee kept targeting her, but it seemed like there was no way to stop the bullying. She thought back to middle school and everything that had transpired in 8th grade after her mom died. That was the hardest year of her life. If it hadn't been for Gareth, she might have jumped in the river. She couldn't believe Mrs. Mackabich had told Kaylee to end their friendship. It seemed like something that hateful woman would do. But it had made Maddy's life a living hell. Trace Reynolds taking pictures of her on his phone was unnerving. Maybe even illegal? She didn't have any classes with him this year. Actually, he might have graduated already. Would it be weird to seek him out and confront him about it?
That was some bullshit,
B muttered as she lit up another cigarette. Yeah, totally.
How do you feel about Rochelle?
She seems all right, honestly. I don't really know her. But she lives in Elk Haven.
Yeah, that's another world.
They stood in companionable silence for a moment as B puffed on her cigarette. Then the wind shifted and a spicy scent caught Maddy's nose. She sniffed the air. Her heart quickened. Suddenly, she felt a warm clench in her stomach. She half turned, searching the crowd. She didn't see him anywhere, but every fiber of her being told her that he was nearby. Then B said,
Oh my God, Maddy, is that him?
Maddy turned around.